When I was 12 years old, I met one of the loves of my life. She was funny, outgoing, social, everything I wanted to be and more. I had always admired her from afar. All of her was the opposite of me. We came from completely different backgrounds and lives, but she welcomed me into her world as if the differences and barriers I saw were never real. She radiated so much warmth and kindness, I could have sworn she was the sun. I still think that sometimes. When I was around her, my flowers began blooming one by one, and I started to come into myself after being trapped underneath a mask for so long. That summer truly changed me as a person. We painted each other's nails, sat on the roof and admired the orange skies while listening to some 2014 SoundCloud music. We ran around the neighborhood, ding-dong ditching houses as if it were our full-time job, and we danced. A lot. I remember one July night looking up at the sky and hoping that it would stay this way forever. I had been in the dark for so long, afraid of myself and my life, and she thrusted me into the light. I grew like a plant that had been without water for so long. If you were to take a snapshot of us that summer, it could only be defined as true girlhood. But nothing that is worth something lasts forever. Impermanence is such a devastatingly beautiful thing. In life, people come and go like the ebb and flows of tides, each leaving their mark on the shores of our souls. Relationships, no matter how profound, will never last forever. They are meant to teach us, to help us grow, and then to move on. We must embrace the transient nature of existence and find peace in the fact that all things must pass. Her and I aren't in each other's lives anymore, but there are still fleeting moments when I am painting my nails or listening to SoundCloud and I feel her warmth as if she was right there next to me. She always tied her shoes by wrapping the lace around her ankle, a habit I developed after being so intertwined. And years later, now at 22, every time I tie my shoes, I sit up and smile, thinking of her. The feeling is really bittersweet. I miss her so much, but in this human life, nothing is permanent. So I will carry her with me for the rest of my life. When I am tying my shoes, on a warm July night, or at 3 a.m. when I cannot escape the idea of getting older. We are all just museums of those we love, like stepping on fresh concrete. Their prints will be embedded in us forever.
I think people are generally in a state of evolution, and that's human. All throughout our lives, we're influenced by what surrounds us and what we surround ourselves with. AJ has been in my life for at least 20 years now. We're well practiced in maintaining long relationships, especially with each other. And I think it's safe to say I wouldn't be the same person without these essential connections. Sometimes it feels like we're the same person, but far more often, our different idiosyncrasies and perspectives offer us a more expansive understanding of life and our experiences. Where AJ is logical, practical, and concise, I am sentimental, emotionally perceptive, and tend to dive deep, although these traits have slowly bled over into each other more and more over time. I used to be afraid that one day we'd know everything about one another and get bored, but it's really the opposite. People aren't finite. You can't just open them up like a textbook and study your way to knowing them completely. If you ever could, it would only be a matter of time before they changed anyway, just because we're human. So I'm not worried about that anymore. I'm just excited to see who will be in 5 years, in 10, or 50.
I tell people all the time that improv rewired my brain, which wasn't my intention going into the class. When you're doing improv, you can't and you don't think about anything else. So it's like a meditation. I don't mind speaking in public. It's not that hard anymore. I'm a better conversationalist. I make better connections, and people tell me I'm more present.
Something that has rewired my brain for the better is the music of the Grateful Dead. Whether I'm happy or sad, feeling lost or overwhelmed, or simply want to move, it never fails to bring a smile to my face. It's pure magic, and I consider myself lucky to be on the bus.
One time in my life when things got very different in a hurry was when we moved to Paraguay. I'd been living in Wisconsin as a little girl, running up and down the streets until 9 o'clock at night when they turned the street lights on, and walking to school a mile each way. And even when I was only 4 years old, I did that. Anyway, we moved to Paraguay, and I was astonished that nobody spoke the language that I understood. So I had to do things like follow the maid and the cook around and listen to them talk and ask them questions. Must have driven them crazy because I was, what is this? How do you say that? What's that? All day long. And I got a lot of information from those two women. But it sure changed my life because I learned to speak Spanish then, and that's held me in good stead when I taught in LA or even sometimes in Denver.
On the days I feel blue, I dance to remind myself what a joy it is to be in this life, in this body, and in this moment.
I was in 8th grade at the time, and I got this thing called Enterovirus 68. And what it was this virus that attacked predominantly asthmatics and younger asthmatics. And what it would do, it was basically close your windpipe, and you would like suffocate and, pass out. And if left unattended, you would like die. So it was a pretty, extreme thing. And I ended up getting it. It was one day I just felt sick. It was really hard to breathe, so I stayed home, and my mom left the apartment that we lived in at the time to go get medicine. And she was originally planning on going to work, and I remember walking around my apartment, literally clawing at my throat, suffocating, and I kept on being I don't want to die, and little did I know is I was pretty much on the brink, I was going to. My mom actually came home and saw me face down on the couch. She thought I was joking with her, and so she turns me over, and I'm completely blue, and she just freaks out and calls an ambulance. For some reason, the guy in the ambulance said if you would have called 5 minutes later, you would be dead. So she freaks out. I had to get driven from one hospital and then airlifted from that hospital to another one in downtown Denver. And I mean, it was crazy. I was in a coma for a week. I was in the ICU, and I was one of the first kids in the country to wake up at the time. I had a 17-year-old in the room next to me who, it had been 2 weeks, and he hadn't shown any signs of waking up. And because of that, I had a lot of news stations kind of flocking to me, and I went on Fox News and 9 News and ABC and CNN and a bunch of just really crazy shit, and I made my way all the way to New York to be on Dr. Oz, which was a trip. He's a bit of a douche, to be honest, but it was funny. But I definitely it was a crazy time for sure, and it's definitely one of those things that kind of changes your perspective on life and death. You kind of realize that it can just happen to you, and then afterwards there's not, at least in my experience, there was nothing. It was just complete blackness. But honestly, that's why I think it's kind of cool that or important that life is kind of more special that way. The fact that there's, for some people's opinions, you know, nothing that happens after, we only really get the time that we get, and you know, that's what makes it kind of special.
I wanted to share a story about my older brother, Eric Salzenstein. He sadly passed away about 1.5 years ago from an overdose, and although grieving has been on and off for the last 1.5 years, I find that moments that I have in Denver, Colorado remind me of him. Whether it's birds chirping or a creek flowing with water or a view from a mountain, I'm just constantly embraced by this like beauty and joy and essence that Eric had about him. He had the biggest smile, his eyes would squint, he just had like this ball of energy, just full of life. And I love living in a state that constantly reminds me of him, and to know that I'm not alone.